Welcome to AI at Work. I'm Elijah Szasz. I'm a serial entrepreneur with 28 years of experience in tech, and today I run an agency that builds AI solutions.
Hey, I'm Kevin Williams. I spend most of my time helping companies figure out how to actually use AI. Not in theory, but in the work itself.
Hey, welcome to the very first episode of AI at Work. I'm one of your hosts, Elijah Szasz, and
I'm Kevin Williams.
Awesome, Kevin. Kevin and I, just for context, live 20 minutes from each other, but we're just doing this remotely because that's another future of work is we never see each other in person. I'm in Salt Lake City. Kevin's over the hill in Park City. I thought it would be good to first frame why it is we wanted to even do this podcast and then get into a little bit of the background for each of us. So AI at work. Kevin, I'm going to let you kick this off. There's a lot of AI everywhere, right? Why at work? Why right now? Why is this important?
So we're both consummate consumers of AI podcasts and literature and whatever. And I've really felt that there's been such a heavy indexing towards highly technical developments. It's all about VO 3.1 or the latest Gemini launch. And that just doesn't really matter to me as an operator or frankly to any of my clients. What really matters is how this technology can be applied to make our lives better. Like, how do we get rid of some of the crappy things that are in our day-to-day, make our people more efficient, get focused on the things that we really like to do, and do away with the things that we don't.
Yeah, I think what I'll add to that too, that I always hear on these AI forward podcasts is just the politics of who hired who went where. And, it's a kind of fun Silicon Valley soap opera to watch play out in real time, but it doesn't really help me, to hear about the latest engineer that Meta stole and is paying total comp closing in on $1 billion or something crazy with options, right? So that's what we're not going to probably talk about, because if you are trying to learn about how to make AI make whatever role you're in, whether that is a business owner, an operator, a manager, an employee, doesn't really matter. There's a place for you where AI is going to make you more efficient, more productive, and probably, arguably, most importantly, safely employed or as an employer, because that's the other thing that we really want to touch on is that a lot of people might be hearing rumblings in the news, and we have midterms coming up, so you're probably going to be hearing about a lot more rumblings in the news of employment and AI's impact on it. But we consider it part of our job as hosts of this podcast to help future-proof you, in a sense, regardless of the role that you find yourself in as an employer or an employee.
No, absolutely. Although, Meta, if you're looking for additional strategic advisories, I'm sure that Eli and I can be bought for an appropriate sum.
I would argue to say even maybe under $1 billion total comp.
Yes. The number is probably south of $1 billion.
I could be persuaded that direction, I think. Yeah. So yeah, Kevin. I mean, I think that's a really good place to start, is by talking about what's really happening out there with AI at work, because I think when most people hear that, there is this undercurrent of fear, right? AI is going to take my job, or AI is going to replace me. And I don't even know whose tweet it was because it was retweeted so many times, or I still see it all over the place. The AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to use it very well just might, right? And we've all seen that, and there's starting to be data out there in regards to employment that is making that feel like it's coming true.
Yeah, I don't think our job here is to hide from some of the realities here. your job category very well could go away. But having the agility of thought and action to figure out what that means for you and your next role, we're also in a time of just unprecedented opportunity for people who are owning this. There's a lot of lateral motion for people who demonstrate that they have a strong grasp of the technology. And if you're sort of smelling that, Bob and Bob from Office Space are showing up and asking pointed questions about what people do in your department, maybe it's time to poke your head out of the trench and look around a little bit and see where greener pastures might lie and what skill sets that you need to develop to own those different roles.
Yeah, the two Bobs.
Two
Can't forget about
Bobs.
the two Bobs. What'd you do between 9 and 9:15? Okay. So, yeah, so there's a couple things going on there, right? You have new roles that AI is creating inside of organizations. You have entire new companies that AI is creating. But I think it's fair to say at this time that there isn't a role in existence, no matter what your business is, what your job title is, that couldn't benefit from some AI tool or another. It's kind of like going back and one of the things, I think we've had this conversation before, Kevin, like when one of your kids comes up to you and asks you some question. Before AI, you would turn and say, "Isn't that something that maybe you could ask Google? Like, why are you asking me that?" And it was something that, I would say to coworkers or employees, like, "Why are you asking me that? That's something that Google can tell you." And Google just became this ubiquitous thing at the workplace that was like the first line of defense for if you needed an answer for something, right? So I'm struggling to think of a role out there where that's now not some prompt, whether, and we can talk more about this, whatever your tool of choice is, whether that is using GPT, whether it's using Claude, whether it's using Gemini, that's kind of the go-to for anybody in any role right now. But the unfortunate part is there's so much to unlock inside of that. It's not just asking a question of, "Hey, where can I find this?" and then clicking a bunch of blue links. You get that answer there. So how you ask that question makes a big difference. How you use these tools makes a big difference. But that is one way to frame it, is it's kind of like that. It's the new search box, except it is the intern in your back pocket that knows everything about everything ever, and you can get those answers.
So I find myself playing this game basically wherever I go about, can this job be AI-ified in some way, shape, or form?
Right.
And the answer is pretty much yes. Obviously, anything where somebody's using their hands, like cutting hair or they're doing plumbing, whatever it might be, that physical action is still pretty safe. And keep in mind that we're going to be talking about not just large language models and generative AI, but there's also the future of robotics and what that means. And in some distant future, like some head cap Floby type thing could be cutting your hair, but that's probably a ways off. But even so, the way the business of hairstyling or the business of plumbing works is totally going to change. The way that a plumber is trained, the way that they do their scheduling, the way that they do their dispatching and routing, the way that they discover new information about whatever system it is. If your HVAC is going awry, having all of that information right at hand is going to fundamentally change the way that they work. And even the plumbers, yes, even the plumbers are going to have to figure this out in some way, shape, or form such that they're going to be amplified, or to be honest, they could be left behind as well.
Yeah, it's funny because those are the very conversations that came up back when everybody started to become an internet marketer, right? Where everybody started to get familiar with the Meta business suite, with being able to try little ads to drive traffic to their websites. And there became this divide in all of these, what people might call like the boring businesses, right? Like the non-tech businesses. I've got a plumbing company, an HVAC company, a landscaping company. And it quickly became apparent who was marketing and who wasn't marketing, who was using the internet, who was using these tools and who wasn't. And I think we're seeing another demonstration of that again with this new wave of AI, because it's not just the things that you mentioned, but it's also just the meat and potatoes, the sales and marketing, right? And how much low hanging fruit there is with AI there. But it's also probably fair to say that the ones who didn't, I don't know, try some of the internet marketing are probably not going to be diving headfirst into AI either.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And listen, you mentioned haircutting and robotics, I think, like in two sentences back to back. So it might be a good time to get into our backgrounds, how we came into this, why we're interested in it. And I'll let you go first.
Right. So, my most recent background is in high velocity digital marketing. I used to buy patents. So, I would find a utility patent. It turns out that everyone's crazy uncle or aunt, they have patents all over the place, and people will invent things and they can't figure out how to actually bring them to market. So, my MO was to go out and use digital marketing, social marketing, et cetera, to identify opportunities and bring those to market. Some of those brands became pretty big and international. We were selling to Costco and Walmart and all these other places, and we were dealing with literally billions of points of data. And as you know well, you give digital marketers data and they're going to use that data. And in order to make sense of it, we had to embrace machine learning. So how do we make correlations between all of these different data sets? I had the fortune of exiting that company sort of a few internet minutes before OpenAI dropped. Mr. Altman giving it to us all without any sort of instruction book. So I found myself in the right place, right time, with the right expertise to really start making sense of this early, right at the end of 2022. And I just jumped in with all four paws and started just trying my best to educate everyone around me about what this could mean in marketing originally, but then just more generally from a business perspective, because it was just so obvious to me that it was going to change pretty much everything, that we were going into what economists call a super cycle. Like the way that internet changed the way that business works, we were going to be on the cusp of one of these that was going to change pretty much everything. And it's really hard to overstate that over 3 years, I actually believe more firmly in that today than I did at the end of 2022, that this is legit. This is absolutely going to change everything. So now I spend a ton of time developing capacity within organizations of how to grapple with these issues. I have a particular focus in workforce development. In the state of Utah, I work with something called the Responsible AI Consortium, where I will lead their discussions on workforce and what the ramifications are going to be, both from a positive and a negative side. And I serve instead as an advisor to Utah's Office of AI Policy, again, on similar topics. So I'm very, very keenly aware of who the roles are that are at risk. I'm frankly a little less confident about what those roles of the future are. So one of the things that I hope to gain out of this collaboration and these discussions is to firm that up, both for myself, but also for this audience, such that we can really help identify what's over the hill. Because it's easy to say that, hey, a first level associate at a law firm is probably going to be in trouble. It's a little harder to say, what are the skills that associate brings to the table, and what are the demanded skills that industry is going to need, and how do you get there? How do you bridge those gaps between the two? We work with dozens of companies, both local and global, helping them grapple with all of these issues and then level up their staff and their employees and their leadership such that they can be more productive.
And so you have programs to do this as well. This isn't just about jumping into a company, you and yourself. You've got a team of people. You're not just a lone gun consultant. You've got complete curriculum to handle all of these different questions at different stages for different sized organizations and the challenges that they're having as well, correct?
Definitely. I think that literacy is really important here. That we'll endlessly talk about various statistics about program failure and pilot failure and whatever, and I can tell you that in my experience, a lot of that failure stems from a lack of literacy in the organization. Everyone is not everyone, but most people are treating these technologies as a tool that you can just cram into the organization and hope that people can make sense of it, but this is new for everyone. It's new for the dev department. It's new for leadership. It's new for the management class. And if they don't fundamentally understand how these technologies work, not from a technical perspective, but from an interactive perspective, they're really not going to be effective at the end of the day. So we strive to build this core competency within a mid-band of organizations such that you have AI champions who really understand how this works, what it's good at, what it's bad at, such that they can start building a culture of change within an organization and at the very least be a core resource for people to dive into. So it's a little bit different. Most training programs are either focused on just pure basics or tool use. How do I use GPT? How do I get the best out of prompting? And believe me, we do some of that as well. Or they're highly technical. How do I do an MCP server? How do I fine tune a model? Whatever it might be. And the reality is the practical sits somewhere in between. And that's what we're striving to impart on our clients is a new mindset such that they're inviting the technology into their conversations, to paraphrase Ethan Mollick.
Right. And it sounds like you're doing something very challenging, and it mirrors what we're trying to do with this podcast as well, where one approach would be top down, right? You have the leaders inform their teams what the AI policy is going to be, the tools that they're going to use, how to use the tools. But there's also this bottom up approach of companies or people, right? There are all these individuals that are making their own choices, that are having to educate themselves, and or just wait until management says, hey guys, here's what we're going to do. And I don't think anybody really wants to do that. I feel like we're in this time right now where the onus is on everybody as an individual to get up to speed as best they can and to bring this stuff into their organization, to start offering value and start demonstrating proficiency. And it's also one of the challenges that we're going to face on this as well, right? Because we do want to speak to both. We want to go top down. We want to go bottom up. We want to talk to the individual, and we want to talk to the people who are having to make these really tough decisions as far as how they're going to roll this out into their organization.
No, indeed. And, your experience with Spark 6, you've probably inherited some of these problems as well.
So many of them.
You hire a really solid team to come in and solve these problems for you. And lo and behold, they don't really even understand what you're talking about. So there's this precursor, this layer of literacy, which frankly is how you and I ended up coming together. You need the literacy to do the enablement. You need the enablement to follow the literacy, and peanut butter and chocolate.
Yeah, exactly that. And thank you for the softball segue into how I got into this as well. So going way, way back, my original background, my first job was in the fitness industry. I did that for 5 years and decided it was a really tough way to make a living. And had a short stint in an investment bank, which was much more difficult to make a living, depending on what you're into. Wasn't for me. I absolutely hated it. And then got into tech. And this was in my late 20s. So I kind of got a late start into it. My first job was in a Japanese automation company that would go in and put in the sensors and logic controllers for different factories. And that led into robotics and machine vision. Machine vision is basically the eyeballs for robotics. And the cool thing was I got to see a little bit of everything out there, how everything is manufactured. And would go to factories all over the world, from automotive to aerospace to making ice cream sandwiches. Like, you literally get to see how everything is made, and then you come in and try to make it more efficient with robotics and automation. So I did that for 10 years, and this is way pre AI. What we called machine learning, the fanciest stuff was pointing a camera at something and being able to see if a chip was missing on a circuit board after learning all of the presence and absence rules based on what we taught it, right? That was that was the real fancy stuff. I then started a really strange consumer product where we took virtual items from video games and pop culture and brought them into the real world. So, energy shots from the World of Warcraft, bags of blood with caffeine and the same nutritional profile as human blood from like the movie Twilight, like all sorts of awful stuff like that. I did that for 4 years and then exited that company. And we were very early in content marketing, producing viral videos, a lot of demand gen. And that was honestly a lot more fun than trying to manage a complex supply chain of expiring boxes of ingredients, like sitting in on a pallet in a warehouse somewhere in Southern California, right? That part wasn't so fun. The digital marketing part was really fun. Building the websites was really fun. The e-commerce was really fun. And so I ended up starting an agency 14 years ago, where we would build big fancy websites like for eBay and Cisco and AT&T, do a lot of custom software, and then a lot of native mobile apps. So where we are today, selfishly, like Kevin, I got into this pretty early. And as soon as these large language models started coding very well, or just building websites with a simple prompt like build me a website that looks like this website, except put this in it, and then it just builds a website. To me, it became very clear where that industry was heading. And I'll say we're not there yet because I am in the middle of it and I see the day to day and the workflows. But where we are right now is that all of these people, whether they are designers or developers, are quickly becoming 10x versions of themselves with these tools. These people haven't been replaced. We're still doing that kind of work, but the opportunity to build things that are AI native or AI first, or built on top of an LLM, that is just happening so much and so quickly right now that we have repositioned the entire agency to go that direction. And what Kevin was saying about the training and the AI literacy, one of the biggest challenges going into any of our legacy clients and talking about AI and all the opportunity is they just don't even know where to start. They don't know where to start. Most of them are still treating GPT like Google. They're just going to a new search bar, right? So that's where Kevin and I initially teamed up to try to get people to understand the basics so they could then see where the solves were that they needed to implement.
So the other piece that I want to add to this is that we're both entrepreneurs. We're both founders. Depending on how you count, this is my 7th startup that I've worked on.
It's a lot of startups.
I didn't
Kevin.
go quite as deep into my history as you did, and I didn't know about the blood. That's
It's a whole
super
other story
interesting.
we'll get into sometime.
We
Yeah.
have to get in there.
Good times.
We'll have to
Yep.
sprinkle those out now and
Yeah.
again. But we're founders, we're operators, we're entrepreneurs, and we have the luxury, I would say, particularly in my organization, of inventing how an organization is supposed to work using these technologies. So within Ascend, my company, we have just an internal saying that we have to eat our own dog food. That are we actually walking the walk as far as automations and approaching challenges and opportunities from an AI first mindset? Or are we just trying to make things work the way that a company like this is supposed to work? I don't really care how this company is supposed to work. I have the luxury of being able to build it in this like really streamlined way. And I think that that's something that we can probably share with this audience as well, or some of those lessons. We've both been around the block long enough that I think that some of our instincts are probably still triggered to the way that things were done. But it is much, much easier to start with a clean slate and build it that way than it is to deal with the ramifications of having a pretty big organization. You have dozens or even hundreds of people running around that have an org structure, and there are leadership chains, and there are all these matrices and all of these different things. And the technological opportunity and the change management ramifications of what we're doing here run smack into each other. So it's another theme that we need to talk about, is that you hire organizations like ours because you need to make changes, but to some degree we can be a bit of a bulldozer in that you're creating organizational wreckage behind you as you're creating opportunities for essentially everyone in the organization to reinvent their job. If management and senior leadership aren't signing up for that, then they need to be really aware of how those pieces are going to work out at the end of the day.
Okay, so going back how many years, Kevin, have you been unemployed? And by unemployed, I mean
Oh, so like
you.
self-employed? Unemployed. Ask my wife. She has opinions about this sometimes.
I imagine you hear this from time to time, like, hey, you should just come work here. And my response is always, I'm unemployable at this point because I've just been doing this too long. And so I just call it unemployed. You're not employed. Or self-employed, or you have your own business. Okay. In more friendly language, how long have you just been running your own show and had the freedom to make these quick changes and implement things that went from, I'm curious about this, I'm going to play with it, to, oh, this is just a better way, and now we're going to do this? How long has that been?
I would say probably 12 years. With
Okay.
some ill-advised stints at clients who sucked me in, like Mr. Zuckerberg, still on the market, but
It happens.
for that
Everybody has a price. Everybody has a price, Kevin, right?
Yeah, I can be bought.
Okay.
But it doesn't make me a good employee, right? Because
No.
I'm always looking at the sort of the art of the possible, not the art of the as is. And I don't do well when you put me in that box. I'm like trying to figure out other ways of doing it, which makes me a nightmare as an employee. So
You ever been fired for trying to claw your way out of that box? Because I have. Have you?
I actually
it
have
happens,
been.
right? Yeah.
It's nobody wants to get fired, but it was a bad fit anyway. So
Yeah. I remember back in the days of, this software is awful, but the whole company uses it, but I'm going to use this software because it's better. No, you're not. You're fired. Like, that's
yeah.
and I get it. I don't blame anybody. But I think this is a good time to talk about some of the things that we went over on how we want to frame this show. Some of the topics that we want to hit. And we already gave a nod to a lot of the other AI podcasts out there. What we don't think is quite practical or doesn't really offer you anything that you can take away and go and use. And so starting off, we both agreed we don't want to be a news show. We don't want to be like current events. We don't want to talk about the AI politics and who's going where and, every micro release, which is just in spades every single week from every frontier lab at this point. But that said, big news does happen. And so the first little bookmark that we had is that if something changes out there or something big drops, we will make mention of it. We'll try not to spend too much time on it, but we want to make you aware of it. You have anything you want to add to that, Kevin, before we go to number 2?
No, not really. But these are the sorts of things that change the landscape. So we're not going to go deep on it today, but now you have the introduction or really the refinement of LLM browsers. That sort of thing has the potential to change the way that we work. And I think that's important.
The keyword is potential most of the time.
Potential. It's just for the spoiler. It's pretty bad right now, but
Yeah.
it will get better.
Yeah.
And the idea is sound for a whole bunch of reasons. And it's these guys are not thinking small. So embracing those sort of things versus the latest little incremental model release, I think that's important. And I think framing how we're going through this. I mean, we haven't really addressed why we're calling it AI at work. So that's the lens that we're bringing to this. that it's the applied aspect of how can we work with this. And like it or not, many of us spend most of our days working in browsers of some kind. So if you're changing the way that that browser-based approach to work happens, then that's something that we need to talk about,
Absolutely.
but not really
Absolutely.
the nuances. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great podcasts out there. And, over time, I think we'll probably develop a little bit of a go-to list. We both have some of our favorites.
Yeah.
And we're inveterate listeners, so we're constantly listening to these things because you just have to in our seats. Everything changes every few seconds, and sadly, we have to absorb all of those model changes and all these other things.
It's honestly a little exhausing. I'm
And,
just
but
gonna
but
I'm
you
just gonna say it
don't.
right now. It's a little exhausting.
Audience, you
The rate
don't.
of change.
You
You don't
don't have
have
to do
to.
this. You really don't. So
Yeah.
we're trying to keep this as practical and applied as we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. So, second thing is questions, because Kevin and I get a lot of them being in the roles that we're in, and we both have teams, and we get a lot of questions from our teams. We imagine we're going to be getting a lot of questions from the audience. I've got a newsletter called Framework Friday, where I just try to unpack one practical thing people can take away. Sometimes I'll do a step by step. Sometimes it'll be a larger overarching topic. But every time it goes out, I get a bunch of questions on the way back. So we will also try to address questions, because if we hear a lot of them and they're the same questions, there's a good chance that you out there will probably have that same question as well. Anything on that one, Kevin?
The question that I feel that I get from my friends and my peers usually is about like retail investing and about, are we in an AI bubble and
Oh,
whatnot.
the AI bubble question.
The
Yeah,
AI bubble
that's a spicy
question.
one. Yeah.
And, first caveat, not investment advisors. Second caveat is that I'm a terrible retail investor. As somebody who should have known better, you would think that I would have loaded up on NVIDIA. Nope. Didn't do it. So
Oh, that's
I
that's
do.
heart that's heartbreaking, buddy.
I do have a background in economics, so it's something I'm interested in, but it's probably not something that we're going to address here very much, unless it gets to that critical point of, oh my gosh, there has been like a bubble pop, and that's going to affect the way that all of these things are priced, and like that, because that rises to the level of big news, and it's going to be unavoidable.
Or how they're utilized in the workplace, how seriously they're taken, all of that. And we're happy to address all of that, but we are not going to provide legal advice, and we're not going to provide investment advice.
But the piece that we might get into, I know this is going to sound strange, it's the politics of AI in terms of the direction that regulations might be going as it impacts businesses and as it impacts people in the audience, because it's pretty obvious there really aren't going to be any federal regulations around AI that are popping up anytime soon, but there's state laws are popping up all over the place.
All over the
And
place. Yep.
it's entirely possible that your organization is already fighting afoul of some of these. So these aren't deep dives, but it's understanding sort of the lay of the land, because, so far it's just been like the Wild West of like this idea and that idea. And the fun police are really coming. And both of us work in sensitive industries, healthcare, defense, whatever it is. And, these are industries that do need to be concerned about both the regulations and the risks that are in.
Yeah. Just when you kind of brought up all of the new regulatory coming online and how we're probably not going to see anything federal anytime soon, but what's happening at a state level right now is moving really quickly. And it's just always been kind of wild to me about how, we're talking about state regulatory for this thing that is happening on the internet, which is global, and how you start getting into some really weird gray area. So, I mean, that's a great example of some of the news that we will feel compelled to talk about, because it's going to impact everybody.
So we'll basically talk about anything but investment.
That's right. Except if you want to cry into the microphone on any failed investments, like, we're here for you. We can always do that.
Questions are great.
Questions are great.
And it is sort of a stump the chumps sort of thing as well, that we'll take on hard questions for sure.
That's right. And speaking of hard questions, the third topic we're going to be leaning into is the future of work. And there's a few different ways to slice that. But one that we're seeing a lot of right now are new roles or new jobs that are coming up as it relates to AI and or automation. And there are a bunch of different places that we're seeing this crop up right now, and also the evolution of current roles because of AI and automation. Just, yeah. And listen, Kevin and I both have kids. We have kids in college. We have kids going into college. And, this is something that I'm currently running in circles around right now. Like, well, what do you study? What do you do? What's the workplace going to look like? So this whole topic of the future of work will probably take several different directions, but it's something that we'll be coming back to often.
100%. Yeah. We covered
Nothing,
that sort of
nothing else
earlier,
on
I
that.
think.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Another one is tools of the trade. So, like Kevin mentioned, we also went into this a little bit. We have the freedom to be able to play with stuff all the time, decide if it's useless or useful or might have a future, but is kind of broken right now. And we can talk about some of that, and we'll try to lean into the successes or things that really made a big impact in our own organizations. Anything you want to add to that, Kevin?
No, this is really important because we are walking the walk. That we are this people tend to overcomplicate a lot of the most accessible solutions. Um, you can get going with very inexpensive tools, off the shelf sort of products. Um, and it's important to note that we've now had 3 years of maturation in the industry, and lo and behold, if you pour a few $100 billion into Silicon Valley, good stuff does sometimes come out the other end. And I'm not talking about building the servers and the models and things like that. I'm talking about all of the investments in all of these SaaS products that you can now start plugging in. Both Eli and I went through periods in our business where you were basically having to duct tape all of this stuff together. And I'm not promising that all the duct tape is gone, and I'm not promising that a lot of the SaaS solutions are good, but you
I would
can.
say less than half that roll of duct tape is gone. I'm still using a lot of duct tape.
There's a lot of duct tape, but still, that there are solutions out there, that point solutions that can solve problems for you, and being able to identify those in a low friction way, and being able to identify. What is a low risk way of testing? So I'm a huge fan of the idea of minimum viable products, and like, how can you come from I have a problem to this is version 1 of how I solve that problem, and prove to myself and to the organization that this is worth solving. And then where does it go from there as far as a scaled solution? And sometimes it doesn't need to, that the little duct tape solution that's like a custom GPT or some basic workflow, it just answers it. But you can develop a duct tape together solution and then use, say, your team to develop that into a full-fledged enterprise solution and have real confidence that it's going to do the thing that you want it to do, which is new. Like previously, you would have developed these things based on a scope and a concept, and there would have been a lot of hope that it was going to work out at the other end.
Or even what I'll add to that too is there are tons of just consumer grade off the shelf solutions that you can try. Some of them are baked into these frontier models. Others are standalone products that are just a subscription. And they may do 60, 70% of what you needed to do for your specific use case in your specific role or company. And that's where people like Kevin and I would come in and say, okay, you found this, kind of works. Now we're going to build a bespoke version of that for your specific use case and your organization, because that is also kind of, I'm going to get into this next segment here about myth versus reality. One of the myths out there is that you can just take this stuff and parachute it into your role and it's going to work seamlessly. And that's just not the case. We're in this golden era right now of people building a lot of things on top of existing products. Like we're talking about, this is, a lot of what the Frontier Labs are giving you it's the starter set. And then you're putting all this stuff on top of it to really make it work for you.
No, absolutely.
All right. So let's go into this myth versus reality. And this is such a juicy one, and it is because we hear these all day, every day, and they're very wide-ranging, and they go from the overarching topic of AI and the future of humanity all the way down to what is this going to do to my job, right? So I'm going to say right out of the gates, most of the myth versus reality that we'll be discussing are probably going to land on a spectrum. It's not going to be totally black or white, right? I'd say every time I've given a talk about AI in this last year, at the end, when it's just kind of an open QA, somebody has stood up and said, tell me about if it's true that AI is just destroying our environment, right? And that's a really tough question to answer because it isn't just a black and white answer. There's a lot to unpack there, right? Like, and we're not going to get too far into this, but just as an example, on one side of it, is there an environmental impact that you can measure? 100% yes. Like of course there is, right? This all takes a lot of energy to make it all work. Energy doesn't just come out of thin air, right? It's going to have an environmental impact. On the other side of it, does it have the potential to unravel a bunch of complex questions that we've never been able to answer to get us to a point of sustainability and sustainable energy? Yes, that potential is there as well, right? So this whole myth versus reality from, is AI going to take my job? Is it going to be Terminator days? Are we going to live in a utopian society where everybody just becomes an artist? Yeah, there's going to be a lot to talk through with all of that. What would you add to that, Kevin?
All right. So this one I struggled with a little bit with prep because I'm a firm believer in William Gibson is a pretty known futurist and science fiction author.
Yes.
The future is already here, but it's just unevenly distributed. And the fact is that from a lens of the art of the possible, most of the things that cross my desk that aren't like complete Armageddon or completely wild will be possible at some point in our lifespan. It's a matter of calibrating to the quality of that reality and the timing of that reality that comes out the other way. So, you squint at a lot of these things and it's possible to see a lot of these futures. But people do get very sort of tied up in I don't know, semantics a little bit of the efficacy of the current model and stalling out and whatever it might be. So I think my goal there is to be a bit of a calibration on the myth.
I think,
Okay, the possible myth.
yeah, I mean, don't you think that the rate of change makes this really challenging as well, right? When you're trying to call out myth versus reality, um, yeah, the myth today might be the reality 2 weeks from now because things are changing so fast. It wasn't that long ago that we were all saying, oh, the image generation is so fun, but it can't make a human who actually has 5 fingers and it's got all these like weird extra thumbs. And then all of a sudden that was fixed. And people, well, videos, that's way too complex. That's never going to happen. With the amount of time that you have been deeply involved in AI, Kevin, would you say today we are further along than you thought we'd be when you started, or not as far along as you thought we'd be when you started?
Well, it's funny.
And we're
I
going
haven't.
back about 3 years or so, right?
Yeah, about 3 years.
Yeah.
The dim days of GPT 3.0, which I
Right.
actually had some preview to even before launch. Absolutely, it's just the ease of use and the ease of access. Humans are remarkably good at adapting and normalizing technology. It's like the boiling frog adage. That it's
Right.
just a slow boil, and occasionally you have those moments where it's just like, did I just really do that in just a matter of moments? There's a pet workflow that you and I were talking about as far as doing pre-meeting prep,
Right.
and it took me like 3 hours to build this workflow. And not only does that basically replace 3 different SaaS pieces that could be in my marketing stack, um, it would have taken a human several hours. And right now, there are high-skilled humans out there that are prepping for these weighty meetings for their team, and they're spending hours or days or even weeks to do so. And now it just pops up in my Slack, and it's just
Yeah.
this automagic moment of progress. And really, you haven't seen anything yet. One of the things that I tend to tell people, okay, not going to oversight this, but the idea that the AI right now is the worst it will ever be, like that is a truism. That whether we have infinite progress to go or whether we just have a little bit more progress to go, it's going to improve. So whatever you're seeing right now, it's going to get better. The other fact that people sort of conveniently ignore is that it is actually tracking above and beyond what all the labs themselves said that it would as far as capabilities. Now, that measurement gets a little bit hazy because of a whole bunch of reasons that are sort of out of scope for this. But the measurement that I like most is that is connecting the LLM outputs to existing tasks. So can an LLM take on a task that would have taken 10 minutes? Absolutely. Can it take on one that would have taken an hour? Yes, in a lot of cases using deep research. Can
Yep.
it take on a task that would have taken a full workday? Some of the vibe coding tools, we have opinions about them, but are getting closer to the point that you can start outputting a full day's worth of dev in, a few minutes, and then measuring, are we getting to a week? Are we getting to a month? And so on and so forth. So what are those practical applications? And one of the things that I like about that approach as well is it also inspires some discipline in the application, because if you can't measure it, it's really hard to know if it was successful. So in my own trainings, we're constantly working with people to identify what's the ROI of what you're trying to do. Okay, you're saving yourself 30 minutes a week. Okay, that has a value to the organization. It certainly has a value to you, but there are 300 of you in your organization that do the same task every week. Now you're saving 150 hours a week. That the organization should care about. But if you just blunder in and are like, "Oh, I'm going to solve this little problem for myself," well, that's different.
So your metric for that in regards to expectations of is it progressing faster or at the rate expected or slower than you initially thought it was? And everybody, including the labs themselves, are saying that it's progressing faster than they anticipated. Your metric for that is the amount of time saved, right? So threading the needle back to the myth or reality, right, is if you put that on a scale going infinitely into the future, and you're saying that AI currently right now is the worst that it's ever going to be, and it's going to keep getting better, but you're already seeing up to an entire day of time saved with just one tool or one workflow. All right. So myth versus reality. As you project into the future, where does that end up? Where does that put people, right? Like, because if that metric of time saved today at its worst is up to an entire day, we've only got 5 of those in a work week, right? So that, I mean, I think it's a fair question, or something that we'll probably be talking about when we talk about the future of work and AI. Is that's where you start to hear some of these things that aren't really a myth or a reality right now, because we're just not there. We don't know of, are we all going to be living in a utopian future where we don't have to work because all of this knowledge work is being done for us? Here we are.
So I can say one thing for sure is that when I bump into a business that is predicated on charging based on human hours, law firms are famous for this, consultancies, et cetera, where you are purely trading the hours worked for a dollar that has some margin that's built into it.
Right.
Those businesses are going to need to take a really close look at what they're doing and why, because they've put themselves in a bit of a bind as far as if you reinvent yourself, you also nuke your revenues.
That's right.
But your clients are not completely stupid. So they're starting to pay attention, and they're starting to ask the right questions of, that this task has a value to me. And if you're, I don't know, a law firm associate again, and you're putting out a contract and that review has value to me, the customer, I don't really care how the sausage is made. I just care that I'm getting the result I need, but I'm also going to want to share in those gains. So sort of that gut check for other business leaders to look at the things that they do that are trading time for dollars and reassess that from just a pure business perspective. This isn't AI. This is just straight business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one of the things that sucks up a lot of time in some of these industries that you mentioned, and I think healthcare falls into this as well, is the layer of spooky language, right? The layer of the barrier between the person who's paying and the person who's getting the money, right? There's like this layer of spooky language of just this knowledge that isn't really accessible unless you are the specialist offering this service, and that is often measured in time. Like, what is the amount of time that I'm going to sit in this chair and be that person for you that dissipates this spooky barrier of language, right? Law is famous for this. Uh, Medicine is famous for this. And I don't know the statistic offhand, but there's an alarming number of people who are now walking into their doctor's appointments, for example, with their output from GPT on what was wrong and almost going to their 15-minute medical appointment as a sanity check, as opposed to, hey, let's try to figure this all out in the 15 minutes that we have. Here's what's going on with me, right? So we're already starting to see some of those barriers crumble a bit. And just from being in business and speaking with a lot of people who deal with all sorts of things in law as well, like I'm starting to hear a lot of stories of similar things happening there.
No, absolutely. I mean, there is a caveat there, which is, I hope that this audience knows that the systems are fallible. Humans are fallible too, but the AI systems tend to fail in ways that can be more catastrophic
Especially with law
in
and medicine.
law, medicine, finance, etc.
Yeah.
That the whole adage that it's like, the world's smartest intern that will cheerfully lie to you is still really true. So we always have a weather eye to hallucinations and how that works. And there's sort of a trust but verify aspect that I hope anyone listening is taking away, that most of you aren't doctors. And if you're relying purely on GPT output without critically knowing how to speak to GPT as a physician would, you're likely to get substandards outputs. Some of it's going to be correct, some of it's likely to be wrong. And when you operate outside of your zone of experience, this is like a full soapbox for me, but if you have the things that you're really good at and the things that make you you and your background and your education and whatnot, and then you have everything the LLMs know, which is everything. And you
Yep.
need to operate at the point where those intersect such that you can amplify yourself based on some sort of foundation that you already have, as opposed to drifting astray too deep into areas that you haven't explored yet. Now, this will improve, and we promise not to get technical, but there's a lot of technical reasons that the models will improve over time, as far as sort of forming a circle of experts around the responses and being able to gauge the value of the response and whatever. But that's still a work in process. And the number of lawyers that have now been sanctioned for just making stuff up, I have in my
Oh,
notes
yeah.
that Deloitte was just had to refund $300,000 to the Australian government because they totally phoned in like GPT as a massive government report. I
Yep.
hope that heads rolled.
Yeah.
So, when I'm talking to leaders, I always insist on non-abdication in a policy. Like, you don't get to claim that it was the AI's fault. No, it is your job to make sure the outputs are right. If you had an intern,
it's what you're getting paid for.
it's what you're getting paid for. So don't drift away from it.
It's not just to put in the prompt, it's to verify the output.
So why would we do this in medicine? Well, both you and I are pretty health aware, and my sphere of knowledge may include certain areas of health that I would feel comfortable operating, but there's a lot of other places that I wouldn't. So it can be really empowering, but there's still definitely a place for experts.
Yeah. Well, we really went off onto the myth versus reality. I think there's going to be more to unpack there than you think, Evan. So another one that we want to come to pretty often is a call to action, or what we call a listener challenge. So we want you to go out and get your hands on this stuff, to actually try things, to find a problem and then solve it. And so we will regularly come across something that worked well for us, or that we think that maybe we did a long time ago, but a lot of people missed, and we want to go out there and explain it again. Anything to add to that, Kevin? Or pretty self-explanatory?
Pretty
Pretty
self-explanatory.
yeah,
We'll give
yeah,
you challenges. We'll tell you what the tools are. Go solve a problem.
yeah.
And you just so much of this has to do with just getting started, and just
Yep.
getting started might be in GPT or using a custom GPT or whatever that is. But there's so many other very low cost accessible tools out there. I like to get people started in solving some personal challenges, like, wrangling the schedules of a couple of teenagers and
Yep.
using some form of automation to make my life or my wife's life better. That's great. That makes an impact on my family, not just the bottom line.
Oh man, it's a whole episode, but it's what I'm currently working on right now. It's like V100. Another one, and this fits into that last really well, is AI out in the wild. So we will often spot in our own companies or other companies something that is really working well. Or not working well, right? Or it could be an implementation that kind of went sideways, and we'll try to dissect why it went sideways, and if it is working well, what made it work. So these would be similar to a case study, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Or complete failure, like the Deloitte
Yeah.
thing. Like, come
Well,
on, guys. What are you doing?
that's the last one. Kind of stealing my thunder here.
Fail forward.
Fail forward, right?
Fail forward.
This would be an automation implementation. It could be a personal thing. It could be with a client. Could be in our own companies or something we saw where it just went horribly wrong. But we don't want to just point our finger at AI and say, "Oh, you ruined everything." We really want to dissect why it went wrong, what could have made it better. So very similar to AI in the wild, but it's focusing on the downside. It's focusing on this on the sad story. And Kevin, I'm just gonna have to take this opportunity and let you know about how this happened to me just an hour ago. So the way we decided to do this, because this is such an ever evolving topic and moves really fast, is we just have a live Google Doc. We've got these different content pillars of things that we think are going to offer a lot of value. And so that's a good framework for us to organize our thoughts and put stuff in there. And we're just starting off. And so Kevin put in his thoughts this morning while I was taking my kids to school, and I can't really read it. And I'm going to go right from the car to the microphone. So I thought, oh, my friend AI, you're going to help me out of this bind. One of the things that OpenAI did quite a long time ago, you might know when, Kevin, but they started implementing these tool calls. And at first there were things like Canva. I'm like, cool. I don't even really know I don't even really know what to do with that, but I'll try something. Just kidding. I'm not going to try anything because it doesn't work. Like it didn't do anything at all. My whole Google suite was in there too. And my company is on Google's platform. It's managing our mail, our calendar, our documents, our drive. And I thought, oh, wow, well, that's really amazing. Cool. So when it released, I went right in there and said, oh, tell me about my schedule today. It's like, sorry, I can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean you can't do that? You're supposed to do that. Well, I need access to your calendar. I just gave you access to my calendar. Yeah, it's not working. Still can't do that. Tell me about the highest priority stuff in my inbox. No, I can't see your inbox. I'm like, what do you mean? I just enabled it. And then all of a sudden, and this happens a lot, we'll talk about this. We'll often learn about a new feature because it just like pops up, right? You won't hear it in a news cycle, won't see any announcements. It just pops up. There's a new feature. And so again, I think it was, what was it, last week, Kevin? We saw these pop up in GPT. Hey, connect your tools again, right? So I'm like, oh, we're going to play this game again. So I connected my tools. And this time I asked the same questions, and it actually did give me an amazing summary of my inbox and the highest priority things. Took a while. It did take a while. I had to chew on it for a while. Same thing with my schedule, right? So it's also supposed to have access to my Google Drive and everything in it. I'm like, hey, perfect opportunity. I've been using the voice on GPT a lot lately, just kind of talking to it in the car. I think that's kind of fun. So I said, hey, it's most recent document. It's called AI at Work. My buddy Kevin just put a bunch of stuff on there. I haven't had a chance to read it. Why don't you read it for me? I can't access that. Like, what do you mean you can't access that? We've played this game before. You can access it. Oh, actually, you're right. I can't access it. It accesses it. Oh, great. Tell me what Kevin added. I can't do that. Like, what do you mean you can't do that? You can see it, right? Yep, I can see it, but I can't tell you what he added. I'm like, but you can see the whole thing. Can just read me the whole thing. How about that? No, I can't. I can't read you the whole thing, but I can give you a summary. I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. You can ingest the entire content of this document and give me a summary, but you can't read it to me. Yep, that's right. So that's what it did, Kevin. It gave me an audio summary of what you put in there, which was only a fraction of what was in there. And I think this is just one of those weird in between system prompt rules, right? Where it says, I will give you a summary, but I'm not going to give you the whole thing.
So I think it's important to point out that when you start yelling at the AI with expletives and treating it poorly, it will remember. So you might want to
Listen,
think
man, I
about
can't tell
that.
when you're being serious or not because I've had this conversation with people, and I should probably be arrested for the way I've spoken to AI.
Alexa in particular. I've said some choice things to Alexa, which of course just triggered on my phone.
Yep.
And it's going to remember. And it's going to be like the sort of stunted younger brother of the big bully in a few years. And I mean, you and I, we're clearly collaborators. So maybe it'll work out okay at the end of the day. But I find myself being polite and gentle with our future overlords.
I think it's just a good human nature thing to do, right?
Well, that too. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
if you can be polite to the machine, then maybe that spills over and you'll be polite to people as well. But it is easy to get frustrated, and kind of going back to how far we have come. And then you kind of catch yourself like yelling in your car at a machine, which is silly in itself, but also because it won't read this document that it has access to in the cloud. It's just kind of wild. It reminds me of, I forget the comedian, but he was talking about like, yeah, I just forget to be grateful, and I'm on the plane and I'm trying to do some work on the Wi-Fi, but it keeps going out, and I'm just like so angry that I'm flying in this aluminum tube hundreds of miles per hour and my internet isn't fast, right? And here we are with these incredible tools, yet it's easy to get frustrated. And I think a lot of that is just the promise versus the delivery, right? That's where the frustration comes in.
It still takes work. And that's what this is about, right? It's figuring out how do we work with the AI and how does the AI work with us, right? We're very far away from any sort of abdication. So, or full automation in most cases. So developing those skills and also the calluses of failing.
Yeah.
And, perhaps one of the things that we want to get to here is the art of failing fast. So that is a gift to any entrepreneur or anyone who has done big projects, that if you can fail fast, boy, I'd take that every day of the week, as opposed to it taking 6 months, a year, or whatever it is. And a lot of these tools,
I think fast has to be defined here, right? Because that's where a lot of the frustration creeps in, is because we both know what it's like to sit down with an idea and start working through it with these prompts. And you can easily get half a day into this and then realize that this just isn't going to happen. Like this isn't going to work out the way that you thought it was. And that is something that probably at some point in time would have been a project that could have spanned months. And then you got to that point, right? Yet it's still very easy to become furious that you just sank half a day into something that wasn't quite ready for that idea yet.
I'm looking at you, Replit.
Yeah. I'm looking at you, Replit. I'm looking at Yeah.
All right.
It's easy to do. Well, listen, we've come upon the hour. I promise next time we're going to get into some juicy, practical takeaways. We have more ideas than we do time. This Google Doc that GPT won't read to me is just going to fill up really fast, and we'll have some great stuff in there for you.
Yeah, this is super exciting. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. That is the pod. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.